Hi, it's Jeff here. Just saw a post. Trying to remember who actually posted this. I look up the name here because I'm reading it at the same time here. Brian Pierce about artificial intelligence and the efforts in that and creating possibly creating centers of excellence. So a center of excellence COE organization uh, to kind of drive the business from on into artificial intelligence. And actually, this is not just restricted to AI. I mean, I've been doing this uh, in different ways, and actually different ways in the same company um, for all kinds of DevOps uh, and other topics for at least for the in the same company for the last 14 years, but actually I've done it in different ways in other companies too. And uh, and so I kind of want to address the couple of these and I'll talk about it because I think this is good. So there's one about being whenever a topic like AI or tools or whatever you want to call or infrastructure or services, internal services is centrally owned. Um, and that's I I'm currently in that kind of situation right now, and and have been also in previous teams in my current company uh, where there's a central team that manages infrastructure, tools, and services on certain topics. And as you say, and that's true, there is you can standardize things. You can make sure that everybody's kind of using the same tool. You kind of you can mutualize, or you can create a cost benefit across. You don't have to have a bunch of different platforms doing the same thing. It does allow to reduce redundancy and waste on that. But there is the definite thing that you say that you can always see that as the central team can be distant from the business users, and be seen in that. And I do everything I can to avoid that, to make sure there's a distance. I make sure that I'm constantly, reflecting and representing my business users wherever they may be, and that's always a challenge. And for people that don't have the experience of doing that, that can be a thing. Then there's the hub and spoke, and I kind of like that idea. Where you say you've got a lot of some of the resources are owned by a center of excellence or a central DevOps team or whatever you want to call these things. And then the typical platforms and process, and I do confirm that that's usually how it is. And then you've got to have different cross functions, which are handled by different business units or product teams or whatever they may be, lines of business or whatever. And then that allows to kind of do things. Now, what happens is now I think about it, actually, the team that I work in now, we're kind of doing that too, because we are offering a lot of things, but we do rely on a lot of the services we do. They do depend on the business, and we do have a lot of the business users, a lot of the people that are there, they are kind of stakeholders. They're involved too in co-running some of the services, and that works pretty well too. It it it's kind of a partnership deal, and tries to avoid there just being a single unit handling everything. That can happen. And then you have the best practices one where like the center of excellence owns the processes, and then everything else is distributed out, and they all have their tech stacks. Now that, of course, like you say, yeah, well, we all know that there are things that you can do that way, and you can have componentization of different ways of dealing with the stacks. Uh, but the eventually thing you can have a lot. What you end up having is a lot of little. You can have a lot of operations teams all redoing the same thing, and you're wasting a lot of energy having it be done by a number of teams that are kind of doing the same work. Um, Across a lot of products. This can happen like really big companies. I mean, like the company I work at has 2,000 software products. So that's a lot. So there's always as much as probably going to have kind of like a kind of an operations departments. You don't want to have each one for every line of business kind of replicating the same thing. Uh, you want to make sure that what they're doing is always different as much as possible, and to benefit from all the different, you know, the ways it can be done. It also it avoids the problem of having wasted funding and doing everybody doing their all funded projects and getting the funding, and then you have to find that, hey, there are like 10 teams out there that are all doing the same, pretty much the same thing. It's always a challenge, right? Uh, so I've done this in different companies, different ways, and in the same company, I've done it different ways too. And all these that you say, there's really no right answer. It all depends. It all depends on how you're structured, politics, and whatever. Uh, and really, it's important to see and people can collaborate. The one of I think that the one of the big things I can see that happens here is that you can have people doing the same thing, and then you get down to intellectual property, like who had the idea first, right? And in the same company, that can be really messy. Okay, it can be really messy. Um, and I've been through that too, where I've been the one that had the first idea first, right? Then other people use the same stuff and they don't cite it, right? It can get really that can get messy because then they start doing things, and if they ever start doing things and don't cite it, then you don't get the credit, right? And that kind of sucks. So whereas when you're doing a small company, where you work in smaller companies, you just have a few people that are pretty much, that's their job that they're working on. One of their jobs they're working on, but they're the recognized, people that do it, and you come to them for the expertise, at least for that topic. So I think that there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think you're right, and I think there are possibly other ways to do it too. It just really depends on the size of the organization and how it's politically organized, hierarchically and politically organized, and how they want to partner, and how your lines of business work together or don't. And it gets really complicated too if you have like two R&D orgs. I mean, like the company I work at now, we used to have where everything was under R&D, products and innovation, or what it was called back then, right? I can't remember. Goes back so far. Where there was one R&D org, and now we have two different R&D orgs. So that gets really interesting, right? Because in how much they work together, or how much. Sometimes I have to ask, what org you work for? What overall org do you work for? Oh, they're on the other one, right? It's not the same one. So this can, and all the lines of hierarchy lines and all that kind of stuff can be different, and the way that you get for funding and things can be different, and all that. And I think that that's the key. The problem is that when you're asking for funding, you don't want to waste it. You don't want to spend it 10 different ways and 10 different times. And what happens when they find out that we've done this 10 times, right? With the same vendor that operate, providing the service, or providing an external vendor or whatever, or you're developing, the same thing in 10 different little teams. And then what happens when you merge them? You start rating them, right? So attrition, all that. So it's kind of all that way. So that's the thoughts. Thanks for your post, and thanks for giving a thing that we can kind of think about of how to apply this. And it's a DevOps question, right? So or that thing of operations, basically. It's an operations kind of consideration.